Hello, I'm Odin, and today I'm going to continue to make the full-body Gundam suit. It's the RX-78-2 body unit. Previously, I completed the head unit for an RX-78-2 Gundam. I mapped the pattern to make the head by using Pepakura. Since then, I have found Armorsmith Designer. It works a lot like Pepakura, but the patterns it produces are for EVA foam builds. The big difference is it has fewer seams. Within the program, we sized the avatar mannequin to fit Joe's measurements, and then scaled the Gundam body unit to fit him. Told the program to unwrap the Gundam body and printed out the pattern onto sheets of paper. Now, some of the big parts are pretty easy to understand, but I noticed the computer gives me a paper pattern with panels that are sized to be paper thin. Or at least that's what it looks like to me, because it still gives me individual pieces so you can build the thickness out of paper. But of course, foam has thickness. So as I'm looking at all these little pieces, and I was really worried about how many I had to cut out, I'm realizing if I cut this from 10 mil foam and then bevel the edges back, I'll get the right shape. So I'm gonna go from cutting out 40 parts to 15? Okay. So I increased the edges of the parts that needed an angled or beveled edge, and then traced that onto my 10mm foam. Then line up the paper pattern to fit correctly inside of the first pattern line. The space between the lines is now how big my angle needs to be for each of the bevels. And by taping a ruler to the inside pattern line, I could set that against the saw blade, and then I could tilt the table until the blade lined up with the outside corner that I wanted to get. The table would tell me the degrees as well, which is kind of nice. Remove the ruler, and then the saw would cut on the correct angle from the inside line to the outside corner, making the correctly sized bevel cut. I was able to cut most of my parts this way, with each having the correct angle cut on them. That is more consistent than I could get by just cutting with a knife. That's the pilot door. I need to put the vents in. I continued with building the chest portion. All the angled panels were cut from 10mm HD foam, and any other panel was cut from 6mm HD foam. Now I used two different thicknesses, mostly to conserve the one roll of 10mm that I had left so I could finish this build. I can order more HD foam from Blick Art Materials online. I put my affiliate link in the description if you want to order some too. Between the pilot door and the chest, there's a panel line. I thought gluing a strip of 2mm foam between them would be a good way to make it. I don't want to do this in a way that isn't going to drive me nuts. Getting the center box and all the corners lined up while gluing was not easy. And I made the collar piece the same way, layering tiny strips of 2mm foam between the 6mm pieces of the collar. But I'm confident that I will not be doing this for any other part of the build because it's very time consuming. The upper parts of the collar had their angles cut first. Then I cut the neckline notches into the sides. Then I glued them on, lining them up with the collar part that was already on the chest. I filled in the open area that's in front of the neck and added some little pieces to finish off the collar. There are two vents on the chest. I cut all of the angles on the parts the same way, lining the corners up before each cut and doing my best to make each cut steady. When I glued them on, they fit perfectly. Now I can glue in the pilot door with the help of some paper to keep the glue from sticking until I'm ready for it. I want the vents on the chest to be open, but foam would probably warp, so I cut them from some 6mm Sintra plastic. These were not easy parts to make because no angle is actually 90 degrees. They're all on some diagonal and it's really not fun to put together. After they get painted and glued in, they'll go on the inside. The stiff Sintra will really help keep the chest from warping. The lower abdomen is covered in red plates. It's basically a square tube that has two sections. I glued together all their panels, each with their own beveled cut, then glued the top and bottom together. The front's going to open, that way it can go around Joe's gut. With all of these parts made, we can do the first test fit.
Oh, that's much better.
That's much better?
Oh, yeah.
Is that going to be wearable, you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
No, I like that a lot.
The waist slips around like it's supposed to, and I'll add some strips of foam to help the corners stay tucked in, and some Velcro along the front ultimately will keep it closed. I start working on the skirt armor. These are made from layers of 10mm foam glued together. And I'm still trying to conserve my foam, so the insides are actually hollow. This mostly worked, but just making them solid would probably be easier. Because some of these plates are 30 millimeters thick, I cut them all out on the bandsaw, starting with the 90-degree cuts. Then I adjusted the table as needed for each of the angled cuts. With 6 armor plates, this happened pretty often. I would adjust the table and cut some foam, then adjust the table again and make some more cuts. I had 6 armor plates to cut out, and 4 of them weren't square, so it took some time. But the saw made it pretty easy, and we made quite a mess too. I still needed to cover the tops with 2mm foam for the panels and panel lines. And I could glue those down with a paper reference for the placement. I used Armorsmith Designer to get the size of the skirt plates, but the patterns were too complicated to be really useful. So in an attempt to make it easier, which actually took more steps, I imported the 3D objects into Tinkercad and then cut thin slices for the top and the bottom of each foam layer. I exported that slice into Photoshop and then reduced the 3D object into the correct size 2D outline, and I included some alignment circles as well. Now, other programs will do this easier, I'm sure, but I'm still new to this computer 3D thing. The last 2 big pieces are the front and back plates on the skirt. These would actually be the pelvis of the Gundam where the legs connect. The paper pattern was useful for the V-fin placement on the codpiece. And stick the V-fin down. With all the major pieces built, I needed to add all the panel lines. My wood burning tool is what I wanted to use, but just a ruler only gives a clean line on the one side of the panel line. So I decided to try duct taping 2 rulers together, 2 millimeters apart. That way I would have a ruler on both sides of the wood burning tip, which made a very straight panel line. Now on these pieces, I just connected the dots. It was very easy to do. The rulers have notches for the measurement marks, and those would catch on the wood burning tip, making it stick in places, which was annoying. So I flipped the rulers over using the back sides that have no marks, and the wood burner moved much easier. When I needed to get into a tight corner, I taped 2 of my snap-off blades together. There are a series of oval panels all over the skirt and a couple on the chest. I made a metal stencil to use instead of freehanding it like I did on the helmet. That way, they'll all be the same size as well. Which I actually need because there's going to be vinyl cut decals that'll stick on after everything is painted. Because of the test fitting, I know I need a brace across the back of the shoulders, and this I'll just Velcro shut, and it'll all be hidden by the backpack. I add some short strips of 6mm foam so there's something to tuck in under the blue chest. The computer pattern just had the plates touch, which will never stay in place while it's being worn. It's important to extend the panel lines here as well. And I spent some time wet sanding all the saw cut corners. This removes all the saw tooth marks and reduces the fuzzy foam look really well. I dry off all the parts and everything gets a couple of coats of white Plasti Dip. I really need to remember to use rubbing alcohol to remove the Sharpie marks before I start painting. Those things have a tendency to bleed through. Then I spray on all of the light colors. The skirt is painted white, and the light blue and red accent colors are added. And I painted the collar yellow. I let the paint set up for a few hours and mask everything off. I needed to protect the light colors so I could finish spraying everything with the darker colors, which worked out really well. I could have let the paint dry a little bit longer, but the tape didn't ruin the paint, which is good because the abdomen is pretty much done at this point. The codpiece has both of its colors. I just need to paint the V-fin. And the light blue is perfect on the chest. I was taping off the rear armor plate when I realized I had forgotten a couple of panel lines. I need those for all the different color separations. And it's right here. I've got a new one burnt here. I need to do another one on this side. Instead of using the taped together ruler contraption like I had earlier, I noticed that the distance between the 2 halves of a sewing gauge is exactly the same. Another round of taping, more colors added, and I can start panel lining. I used a tiny brush and some flat black hoppy paint on all the panel lines that I made with the wood burner. But on some of the panel lines that I made by layering 2mm foam, the space was so narrow I couldn't get a brush into it. So I tried filling my glue applicator with the black paint. And it worked out really well. giving me some really fine lines. However, the flow is difficult to control, so starting and stopping was a little tricky, and I would leave the needle in the panel line and just change direction. And the drops are so small that static electricity would have the paint jump onto the foam. I still plan to do this again on the arms and the legs. The vents in the chest were glued in with some 5-minute epoxy. It's a lot of fun trying to line up the vent and support the chest so the 5-minute epoxy has the full half hour to cure. More custom water slide decals were made. There are small markings and graphic designs all over the Gundam. If you haven't used these before, you soak the decal in water for a few seconds and then set the decal where you want it, because the water, it makes the decal film float off the paper backing, and then you can pull the paper backing out, leaving the printed film right where you want it. When they dry, it's best to seal them with a clear coat, because they'll move if they get wet again. All the big white markings on the chest and the abdomen were made with custom cut vinyl. It's supposed to be as easy as peel and stick. That's the theory anyway. And just like on the head, on both the armored skirt and the chest, there's a bunch of these small silver stickers. I cut these from aluminum heater tape. And there are still more tiny white lettering labels in the chest and the abdomen, but I'm going to have to custom order those as waterslide decals, and they'll get put on in a later video. I'm just going to use Velcro straps to hold everything together. I'm going to apply 2 or even 3 coats of contact cement to help stick the Velcro on really well. I want good adhesion to the foam. I add 1 strip across the back of the chest to keep it closed, and I cut this strip in half after it's in place. The skirt armor can't just Velcro to Joe's black suit. It needs a belt to bulk it up and to allow clearance for the future leg armor. There we are. Oh yeah, that's great. Except it wasn't. The side panels needed more room, and the belt was too round looking. It needed to be a little more square. I decided to add wedges of foam to flatten the look of the front and the back skirts, and then it would also give the space needed for the side plates. I built up a block of floor mat foam to 1.5 inches thick, and then I cut the wedge shape and size that I needed on the bandsaw. I glue them to the belt with multiple coats of contact cement, and add Velcro over them, and they're good to go. One more good test fitting, and we can see a few minor things to adjust in the future, but for now, the Gundam has a body unit. All the paint and supplies for this project I picked up locally. HD foam is available online from Blick Art Materials. Use the link in the description of this video and you can help support my channel. Plus, if you order enough stuff, you can get free shipping from Blick Art. I've got the head and the body unit to my full suit Gundam cosplay. This has been a really challenging build because all the details and the specifics are so, well, specific, and it's more than I typically do. And trying to maintain the level of detail that's actually in the real grade Gunpla, yeah, that's a challenge. But you know what? I'm enjoying it, and I'm gonna do the whole thing. Now, the next video, it won't be out for a couple of weeks. I actually haven't even started yet, but you know that I'll be making it out of foam because this is how Odin makes. Without the rest of it back there, it's kind of a big face. So I think what I need are armholes and a Joe. I want to thank Suze Wilson, Mickey Rat, and all of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.